Welcome to another episode of Titan PI TV, where we're looking at the inside workings of a live operational investigation agency, that being here at Titan in Derby. Today, by popular demand or by request from one of our subscribers, I'm going to try and explain and be informative as regards the regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000. Bit of a tongue twister, so I will refer to this now as the RIPA Act. So RIPA, it passed its parliamentary passage in July 2000, 26th of July. It was instigated and introduced by the Blair Labour government in 2000. RIPA was effectively introduced to regulate the manner in which public bodies may conduct surveillance and access a person's electronic communications. So previous to 2000, police or public bodies were able to follow a person based on intelligence. That changed at this point. So first of all, let's look at what public bodies are. So an instruction might come from a council. The council may be looking into fly tipping in a particular location. So the council are classed as a public body. A housing association. So a housing association may have antisocial behaviour issues and they may request a private investigation company to investigate that. A housing association is a public body because the contract is by and paid for by the government. It might be that the NHS get in touch. They've got a doctor or nurse or an employee who has long-term absenteeism and they want it investigated. The NHS is a public body. Trading standards. Trading standards may be looking into brand protection. They might be looking at knock-off or fake handbags, for example. Trading standards is a government agency. So anyone that is funded by the public purse is a government agency or falls under this act as a public body. So there are 5 parts to this legislation. I'm just going to discuss the first 3. So part 1 looks at communications. That will be interception of phones. Part 2 looks at surveillance and CHIS. CHIS is covert human intelligence source. And part 3 looks at the investigation of electronic data by encryption. So that might be intercepting emails and that sort of thing. So quite clearly, the only part which relates to us in the private industry would be part 2, because that's the only part that's legal. So we've spoken in previous episodes about phone hacking. Please go and have a look at that. We cannot lawfully do phone hacking. So part 1, communications, it's a no-no for us. Part 3, which is investigating electronic data, which is encrypted. Quite clearly, once again, that's hacking and would be the computer misuse. So we cannot do that because that would be an offence. So the only part which applies to us in the private sector would be part 2, which is surveillance and covert human intelligence sources. So let's look at that in a bit more detail. So part 2. The surveillance side is separated into directed and intrusive, and then obviously we've got the CHIS side. So let's look at directed surveillance initially. So directed surveillance is a pre-planned surveillance imposed on an individual or group of people. Okay, so an example of that would be the NHS from earlier. The NHS has contacted Titan. They've got a rogue employee who has triggered their absenteeism, and they want it investigated because they think there's more behind this. They may be moonlighting, i.e. working somewhere else, or they may have had an accident, but they are exaggerating how that has affected them and it's resulted in absenteeism and time off. So the NHS gets in touch with us, instructs us to look at this employee. That would be directed surveillance because they are directing us or instructing us to look at one in particular person. So that's directed surveillance. Intrusive surveillance. Intrusive surveillance would be surveillance inside a property or inside a vehicle. So an example of that might be a camera in a house, or it could be a listening device, an eavesdrop device within a vehicle. So that's directed and intrusive. Directed, looking at someone. Intrusive is, by its very nature, it's intrusive in its tactic. It's a camera or it's a microphone in a private house or a building or a vehicle. If we look at CHIS then, so the covert human intelligence source, this in our world would most likely fall under, we have been instructed by the council to have an undercover operative enter a number of apartments and pose as a tenant. We are instructing, or the council is instructing, the operative to gain evidence of antisocial behaviour. So that is quite clearly a covert human intelligence source. It's using an operative undercover to gain information around antisocial behaviour. So if we rewind, a public body wants us to conduct directed surveillance, so looking at an individual or individuals. So if this is the council instructing this, then it would have to be the chief exec who would authorise it, and that would last for 3 months. If it's the police that are instructing us, it would be by the rank of at least superintendent. If this was moving very fluidly around intelligence which was coming in fast, then the superintendent can give us oral authorisation for 72 hours. If it's written permission, it lasts for 3 months. So the key aspects of this bit of legislation are necessity. Is what we're doing completely necessary? Is there another way that we can do it? And if we can do it via a different tactic, which is less intrusive, then that should be chosen. Is it proportionate? So is the tactic proportionate to what the objective is? If the answer is no, then we can't do it. And we've covered before how we use Japan or plan. So justified, accountable, proportionate, etc. And we've gone into those on previous episodes, so please feel free to look at that. We need to consider also another key element is collateral intrusion. What is collateral intrusion? Well, I'll give you an example. Collateral intrusion would be where we're instructed by a public body to gain evidence of a person, their lifestyle, when they come out of the property. The property, however, has a communal door. Lots of other people use that communal door. If we are recording people coming in and out that door, other than our subject, we are gaining personal information on other people. So that would be collateral intrusion. It might be in the case of a covert human intelligence source, a CHIS, that there are cameras put in an office or microphones. Collateral intrusion will be conversations of other office users and what's being said. And we've got to minimise that as much as we can. So that, in a nutshell, is the regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000 covered. So in a nutshell, if you are instructed by a public body, there has to be an authority in place. If it's surveillance, it will be directed or intrusive surveillance, or it will be a covert human intelligence source, a CHIS. We're not looking at part 1 and part 3. So we're not looking at intercepting electronic data, which is part 3, or intercepting phones, which is part 1, because that's highly illegal. So I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. That is another episode of Titan PI TV in the bag. As always, please give us a thumbs up or subscribe to the channel. Till next time, thanks for listening.